So good morning once again. It's great to see all of you here today. Karibuni sana, and it's great to see another Father's Day. Fathers in the house. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Continue to lower in your space as fathers. As we said, it's exciting time to be fathers because the challenges are many, but the opportunities are also many. And it's an honor to be a father. And so, to every father who is here today or who is joining us by way of social media or any other platform, fathers who have been bold enough to take up the mantle and to lead families and to guide their wives and families and to take a role in their communities and to go out there and lower and reclaim their spaces. To you all, mine is just to wish you a happy Father's Day. Think about what different you can do today for yourselves as fathers and for the people that are called by your name. And for the rest of you, we have high expectations today. So I hope I'm not putting pressure on anyone. I'm just talking. So thank you so much. Welcome, Pastor Seth. It's good to see you today. And I hope your trip to Western was full of God's blessings. So thank you very much. So today we continue with our series, Becoming Mavericks. And I trust and hope that we are all learning something as we go through this series. We've had an exciting last 2 weeks, and I am personally learning a lot as we go through the series, and I hope the same for you. I would really have wanted to hear what people are picking from the series, and hopefully we'll get time as we go along to just reflect on that, maybe in small groups or back at home as you discuss as families. It's good to pick the lessons and to see what God is saying as we go through this series. Today I speak about the topic, the adventures of Mavericks. I think this is a catchphrase that a lot of us would identify with, because when we started LifeSpring, it was a very common phrase. And those of you who are here would remember that we used to say that we are Mavericks who thrive in adventure. You remember that? We used to say that we are Mavericks who thrive in adventure. And today I want us to reflect on that. Why did we used to say that? What was driving us? What was a dream? Because the same thing that was pushing us then is at the center of what drives Mavericks. Mavericks love adventure. Mavericks love the thrill. Mavericks love energy. Without energy, without passion, without something that thrills you and pushes you to the edge and leaves you almost on the cliff with a bit of scare, with a bit of drama, there is no Mavericks. And so Mavericks thrive in adventure. What are the adventures of your life? What makes you tick? What makes you different? What makes you get outside the box? Because that is it about Mavericks. And so today we look at that. The drama, the lives, the times, the moments of Mavericks. And how in the midst of all that drama of their lives, how you see God and how God is always working in their lives to make the drama not a killer, not suicidal, but a drama that exalts God. A drama where God is in the middle of all of it. A drama where God is the initiator of the drama and the sustainer of the Mavericks through the dramas. And to help us do this is there is no other better story, there is no other better example than the life of Joseph. The life of Joseph. And so today, as we look at this topic, the adventures of Mavericks, we want to look at lessons from the life of Joseph. And I'll read some scripture. Our reading scripture is from Genesis 37. I would first want us to read from verses 1 to 7. Bear with me. It's a bit of script, quite a passage, but just to give us a bit of that background about the drama, the adventures of Joseph. And we can pick quite a number of lessons from this. And so Genesis chapter 37 from verses 1 to 7 says, Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flock with his brother, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Silvah, his father's wives. And he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain, and out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. Let's go to Genesis 39 from verses 1 to 10. I'll just keep a lot, but let me just pick Genesis 39, verses 1 to 10. Indeed, to get a good picture of the story, you need to read all the way from Genesis 37 to Genesis 46, chapter 46. But let me just pick a few more. Genesis 39 from verses 1 to 10. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. Remember, he had been sold by his brothers. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. Note that. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. And he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord gave him success in everything he did. Note that. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. Verses 5. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he had owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. That's a very interesting one. That from the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessings of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. Wow, it's a blessing to work with people who fear God. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built. Joseph alikuanga na six-pack. Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. And he said, "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though he spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. Very interesting. The drama of the Mavericks. Let me read the last one from Genesis 41, from verses 37 to 45. 37 says, "The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, 'Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?'" This was after interpreting the dreams of Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Wow, what power there. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt." Then, verses 42, then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in the robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. Wow, look at that. Look at that style and glory put on Joseph. He put on him a signet ring on his finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain. That is what would say, ni kama bring, yeah? Today. My chain, allowed his neck. I'm almost figuring that he would be looking like Lois Sonko was looking at some point when he was at the top, yeah? He had him laid in a chariot as his second in command. And people shouted before him, look, and people shouted before him, "Make way!" Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. What a big honor to be given. And to be given in style. Verses 45, Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphenath Paneah, and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, to be his wife. Wow. Alitunzwa kweli, eh? And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. So now, a lot of drama here, a lot of adventures, a lot of greatness, born with greatness, grew with greatness. Sometimes the greatness brought a lot of calamities. And here, more greatness being thrown eventually to Joseph. And so today I want us to learn about the adventures of Mavericks. Because indeed, if in the Bible there is a Maverick I admire, it is a Maverick called Joseph. He knew no borders. Life threw all its good on him. Both miseries, both greatness, anything that life could find, it threw on this young man. And as that happened, he would find himself going through very difficult times, which almost are difficult to fathom. And he would also find himself in moments of greatness. Indeed, a lot of drama. He was tested and pushed to the limits, both by miseries and by greatness. And it's really interesting to see how the young man responds when he went through all this drama, all these adventures of his life. And I think as Mavericks, we can learn a lot from him. Because Mavericks have a lot of these dramas. They have a lot of greatness that they find themselves into or is thrown into them. And they don't shy away from taking, whether facing the miseries, the difficulties that are thrown into them, or even the greatness that is thrown into them. But from this man, we're able to learn a lot. And so I'll be going through several lessons and just analyzing what we have just read, and much more that you can read in your own time from chapter 37 to chapters 45. And so the first thing is what I call the adventures of love and hate. The adventures of love and hate. And in Genesis 37, from verses 3 to 4, you're able to see a bit of that. And the Bible says, and now Israel, loved Joseph. The father loved Joseph. And he was not hiding it. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him. The drama of love and hate. And I know today, as we look into our lives, we are able to relate with that. Some of us are able to relate with us. That for some of us, we know that we are loved and hated in equal measure. Especially those people who try to do something great. Especially those people who try to be different. And especially those people who try to discover their path, their God-given path. Somehow, whenever you get to those zones or times or seasons of life, there is a way it attracts both great love from people who understand you, from people who relate with you, but also equal measure of hate from people who either for one reason or the other can't understand you or are jealousy or jealous of you. And so Joseph finds himself in that spot where he had a father who loved him so much for whatever reasons. And I know this can cause a lot of sibling rivalry when the father or the parent seem to love one person more than the other for whatever reasons. In this case, Jacob loved him more, in my own thinking. One, because he was the firstborn of his younger wife, Rachel. And Jacob loved Rachel. And there was no hiding. Of all the wives, this was the most favorite. And so Rachel giving him a handsome boy, I think he couldn't resist but to even love the son much more. And the other 10 brothers, 11 plus, including his younger brother, could see that. And for them, instead of picking the love that the father had, what they picked was jealousy and hate for this beloved brother. As we look into this, it's good to reflect about our families and where we are. Do we ever see this type of things? Might you be a case study of love and hate in equal measure? Whether from your family, in the workplace, with your seniors, where you work, in the community where you are in. You are not the first one. I just want to remind you from this that being loved does not mean that you are the greatest person in the world, as Joseph would come to know later. Nor does the fact that you might be hated make you the worst one. Jesus, our own Lord Jesus Christ, was despised and adored by his apostles. He was also despised and hated by those who opposed him. And that is life. Being loved and being hated all come in a package. And for Mavericks, because they try to do great things, they try to be different, they try to distinguish themselves, they often find themselves in this exact situation where they are loved and hated in equal measure. But what matters more is what you do when that happens. Do you give up? Do you live a life of self-pity? From Joseph we learn that you have to learn to move forward, to go ahead, to continue to pursue your dream, and your path, your God-given path, despite the love and the hate that comes with all that. One of the things that made the space of Joseph very heated was a gift he got from his father, a beautiful coat. And sometimes we give people gifts, and to you are expressing love. But to others, they are seeing how you have despised them, how you have separated them from you. They'll look and say, you see, he or she has given so and so, but not me. And this simple thing, the beautiful call that the father used to express his love for his son, became a tool, a symbol for hatred from his brothers. Aside from the beautiful court, the unusual dreams cost him a lot of jealousy and hate from his brothers too. They became envious of him. And later on, they decided to take his life because of jealousy. So when an opportunity came, they threw him into the cistern or pit and had to make up a story to hide the truth from their father. That is how jealousy lurks, even across family relationship. The drama, the adventures of love and hate. And as we think about this, may we pray and may we desire that our expressions of love to one another will never be the source of hate and jealousy from the others that we treasure. May God help us to navigate through these type of circumstances. As we do parenting, especially as parents, parenting that has become very tricky these days. And we need always to come back to God, our source, for wisdom. If you find yourself in situations like this, manage them. Seek God's help. I like conversing with my children because sometimes what you do to one may be interpreted differently by the other one. And mitigating and managing and curing that, sometimes you have to spend much more time just making sure that does not create a lift. But if you keep quiet, then it can actually have the potential to create a very great lift. A lift of love and hate. And so may God help us as we learn from this Maverick and the things that he went through. Even as parents, may we onboard that and learn a lesson or two and ask God, what would we rather do? And how do we manage such type of things when they come up? So the adventures of love and hate are real in this life. They are even more real for Mavericks who try to come out, to be different, to be distinctive, to be expressive about what they love. Because not everyone will always understand you. But the second adventure or thing that we learn is his life through unpleasant circumstances. Life through unpleasant circumstances. And the following realities of his life come to mind immediately. He lived with 10 brothers that hated him. 10 brothers that hated him. Can you imagine living with 10 brothers that hate you? Some of us has just one. And it looks like a hell on earth. 10 brothers that hated him. And they didn't hide his hate. They sold him into slavery. And even before they sold him into slavery, if you read the Bible, they had first put him in a cistern, in a pit. Luckily, the pit did not have water, otherwise he would have drowned. And one of them, I think Benjamin, pleaded with them just to leave him there instead of killing him. So after that, they saw the merchants and they said, we can make some money. We can make some bucks here. So they sold him into slavery. And against his will, he was forced to live in foreign land, in Egypt. And it was also long, even when he went there. You know, it's like You are learning from the frying. They say you are learning from the frying pan to the fire. A lot of drama. Even when in the fallen land, where he had been taken against his own will, he was wrongfully cast into prison. A lot of drama. A lot of unprecedented circumstances. A lot of things that have been cast on him without justice. People are very unjust in dealing with him. How many of us have gone through that type of a life? Very few of us. Yet, sometimes we are still looking for God's favor. And God's favor is all allowed us. So this young man, by the time he was 17, 18, 20, had gone through a lot of drama. And if it were many of us today, we would be dealing with what is being called mental health. I wonder how many of you would have gone through this and not become a case that requires mental health attention. Yesterday in Citizen, I was watching a young lady of 15 years narrate how she is going through and coping with mental health. Because in school and at home, she felt that she had not been appreciated at one point or the other. But look at a man here, just slightly over 17 years. And I would want really our young men and ladies to see this. Having gone through a lot, living with 10 brothers who hate you, and they don't hide it. Put in a cistern so that you can die. Sent to slavery in a foreign land. It's like now you are sent, it's like you are kidnapped and sent to Tanzania or Rwanda or Congo in the forest by your own brothers. And they told the father that they came back with the coat that the father had done for him. They came back with it home and told the father, and it was dripped in lab brand, sheep blood, so that the father believes that he is dead. And then where you are sent, you're also put in prison. How many of us can take that? For a lot of us, we would just break down. For a lot of us, we would say, enough is enough. To hell with this life. But this young man was able to bear all that. Very unpleasant circumstances. He never found words to think that his God had forsaken him. He continued to soldier on like mavericks. The adventures of his life were becoming very unpleasant by that time. But the man continued to put his reliance on God. He didn't allow it to bubble up and to grow, the hatred to grow, the feeling of being sidelined to grow in him. He kept his focus. He kept his hope. Hope alive. How many of us are able to keep hope alive when the circumstances become so strenuous, become so unpleasant? Because that's when you really know the substance we are made of. All that can only leave you exposed, and there is no more hiding what stuff you are made of. But this is a man who was made of great stuff. He had removed his reliance on men, including his own brothers. And he had put his hope on God. Each one of us have had experiences in life that were not enjoyable. But can any one of us truthfully say that we have endured the situation Joseph faced? Let us avoid the temptation to complain when severe challenges or hard times come our way. Jesus suffered long free too. His response to such serve as a great lesson to each one of us. And you can read 1 Peter 2 verses 19 to 23. And you see the encouragement we get from Jesus himself. When we go through tribulations, when we go through difficult times, when we go through unprecedented circumstances, it is time to look unto God. It is time to remember the stone from which you are hewn. It's time to go back to anchor, the anchor of our lives. And we can talk the whole day about lessons from this young man in that early age of his life and how he was able to hold together despite very unpleasant circumstances. But the third adventure is what I call through God's presence and blessings. Through God's presence and blessings. And I think this is what made the difference for Joseph. He learned that even when you are going through the most difficult of times, just make sure one thing, that you are in God's presence and the presence of the Lord is with you, and that you don't depart the space of God's blessings. That was his salvation. That is the most maverick thing he did. Not to remove himself from God's presence and the space of God's presence. Could we not say the same about if one of us? But wait a minute, did we not just observe that he was mistreated in a very severe way? But despite all that, he was still blessed. The fact that he went through unprecedented circumstances did not mean that he was not blessed. He still had the mark of God on him. And God sometimes allows us to go through those unprecedented circumstances that we may learn, so that we may mature, so that we may grow in faith, in character, in our trust in him. When Joseph was both a slave and a prisoner, the Bible says that the Lord was with him. When we go through the adventures, the difficult adventures, as a trailblazer, as a maverick, remember, the Lord is still with you. No matter what happens in our life, if God walks with us, that is really what counts. That's what we must remember. So whatever you do, remain in God's presence. Where his limelight is, remain there. Remain in the arena where God's blessings and presence is. Do not depart. As we have kept saying through this series, the most important thing is to always remember that you have a covenant with God. And God will never depart from the covenant. If you remain in there, in that space, your blessing will remain. That is what counts. The fourth adventure is what I call the adventures of style and character. The adventures of style and character. And very interesting because we've seen Joseph, style was thrown to him. He didn't have to look for it. Right from when he was born, he was praised by his father. His father loved him. He showered him with love and praise. Not later after that, his father gave him a very magnificent coat. I wonder sometimes whether this is a coat for which a song was sung. The coat of many colors. It was by who? Was it Dolly Parton? You guys, I know you only listen to Christian music. But I love listening to Dolly Parton. I love listening to country music. I would listen to it anytime. And one of those songs, the coat of many colors. And it would appear like this coat was one of many colors. A beautiful coat. A magnificent bracer. And when he wore it, everyone would look at him and he would be the center of attention. It appears the father had put in a lot of style and flavor to it. The mother. In this case, it was the father. But I know mothers today spoil our children more than the fathers do. Maybe this is a call for fathers. Where are you? I think we need to reclaim that space once again. In Joseph's times, it was the fathers. But these days, it's the mothers who tend to do that. I agree. My wife is reminding me. The father threw style to the son. And sometimes we are afraid of exposing our children to style. Jacob did not. He threw it to his son. And I think his son learned to omoka his style early enough. And so later on, when the same is done to him by Potiphar and Pharaoh, when he is given the lobes of greatness, the lobes of being governor made of fine linen, when he was given the bring-brings, the chains of gold, and was given the power and ability to traverse the country in chariots, it didn't trouble him. The parents had already prepared him for that greatness. They had already thrown a bit of the style to him. He had tasted it. And even these greater ones of being governor and with all the tidings that come with that had no negative effect on him. The adventures of style. Allow your children sometimes to taste the style. The other day, I had a debate with one of my sons. He wanted to put some locks. You call them what? Dreads. And so, of course, the mother will always agree very fast. And I'm usually the stopper. And so we had the discussion, and so I called my son, I asked him, so what is the motivation for this? And you know, I am the one who have all the many questions. They know before that you pass my test, bado haijaifa. But finally I said, okay, let's see. But I just wanted to understand what is the motivation. But at the end of the day, there are things that you don't really have to crack your mind so much about, provided the intention is right. It's not pushed by peer pressure or negative intentions. For Joseph, the father allowed him to throw in style from early in his life. And this was also thrown to him by Pharaoh and Potiphar where he went. And I think, in a way, exposure to experiences help us when we are in the tricky times of our lives. I've heard people say that for people who have never been allowed to go out there and to interact with others, the day they go out, they become overexcited. In my book, I have dedicated a whole chapter to what I call openness to experience. Because I feel sometimes the people who are quick to make mistakes are the people who never experienced any different life from the only one that they knew. So in the book, I argue that one of the distinguishing character of Mavericks is that they have open minds and they have learned to open themselves to new experiences. And I encourage all of us, wherever you go, be open to learn. Myself, God has been very good to me because I've worked in different countries. I've worked 5 years in Sudan, the one of Khartoum, the one of the Arabs. And when I went there, I had to quickly learn their ways, their foods, the way of the Sharia law, because it's under Sharia law, how to handle their ladies and their wives. When I went there, the first time I went there to set up an office. And when I set up the office, I hadn't realized that the ladies' washrooms have to be very far from the men's washrooms, where even the eyesight cannot see. And so I rented an office where the washrooms were on one side. And labor officers, before I knew, labor officers had been brought to my office. And I was accused that there is a Kenyan here who have come to change our culture. And so I was told, young man from Kenya, you have to get an office where the toilets for men are on this side and the one for ladies are on that side, and their eyes must never meet when they are going for those respective responsibilities or duties. And so I had to quickly learn. Dealing with my drivers then and my staff who are especially ladies, I had to quickly learn how to do everything, including celebrating people's birthdays. Openness to experience. Earlier on, I had worked for 2 years in Luanda when I was a bit younger. And being in Luanda and seeing their beautiful ladies every day taught me early that this world has a lot of diversity. And you have to take it in style and in wisdom. And going through all the districts, I've gone to all the districts there and seeing how they live in their native areas. Seeing how they have dealt with history. The history of, what do they call it? Genocide. A lot of diversity from what we have here in Kenya. I worked in Ethiopia. And traversing the country, Hawassa was always my favorite destination when I was in Ethiopia. And learning how to deal with their food, learning how to enjoy injera was the most difficult. It would leave my taste buds screaming. But yet I had to enjoy it for the time that I was there. But the most dramatic, I worked in Nigeria for 1 year. That was the most dramatic. Everything there is drama. Right from taking your journey from your hotel or home to the office and having to endure taxi drivers who are very talkative. You get tired before you get to the office. Yet you can't ignore them because they loam their space and they occupy it completely. They know how to lower and occupy. And so openness to experience is a great thing. And a bit of style is not necessarily bad. Because it prepares you for those times when it is thrust on you. So that you don't make mistakes. And so that you don't become proud. You are able to remain humble. And so the adventures of Joseph was one of style and character. And I've talked about style. He definitely was thrown into more style than any one of us here can talk about. But interestingly, although his coat of many colors had been taken off from him, something he really treasured, although that style was taken away from him, he was able to keep his character and integrity. He was not defined by the style of the times, by the fashion of the times. That's what was not the real substance in him. Because a lot of us today want to be defined by the style of the day, by the fashion of the day. When I was growing up, when I was a young boy, there was one type of trouser, if you didn't have, hauko umeshika, ilikuwa inaandikwa hapo Safco. Some jeans, eh? I have anyone who can relate? Oh, I can see some people relate, He was able to keep his character and integrity. He may not be wearing a beautiful coat as a slave, but his character stood among other slaves, even in Egypt. Instead of the fancy clothes and outward appearance, there is no doubt character is the best opportunity to gain respect and trust from others. He had all the style thrown to him. But that is not what earned Joseph, the maverick, the respect he needed to govern, the respect he needed to survive with strangers, with people in foreign lands. It was his integrity and character. Mavericks get the opportunity to adventure in style, but the most important is their adventures of character. May you grow in your character. May you not allow your character in any way to be endangered, because that is what will make you great. That is what will thrust you into the greater greatness. But adventure number 5 is what I call the adventures of diligence and productivity. Adventures of diligence and productivity. Now, the life of Joseph is very interesting. And the more you think about it, the more you want to say, I need to do more. I can be better. And that is the drive of Mavericks. Joseph was a diligent man. It amazes me that when we meet Joseph in the Bible, he is 17 years. That is the age of my son, Jeff. 17 years. At that age, he was tending the flocks with his brothers. He would be sent by his father to look for his brothers, and he would have encounters in the field. It is around that time when he was being thrown in the cistern. When he was taken to Egypt as a slave, he worked hard in Potiphar's wife. It's around the same time. I would imagine all that was happening between 17, maybe 20 thereabout. That is when he was tending his father's flock. That is when his father was trusting him a lot. That is when he was doing work by himself. That is when he was being put as a slave. And he worked hard even as a slave. That is when he was being put in charge of Potiphar's house, with all the glory that the house had. And he would distinguish himself above every other slave. What do we learn from Joseph? Joseph did his best. I lack any other words to describe how he did it. He did his best. Alijituma. Alifanya. And he lost to every opportunity that he was thrown to him. Whether he chose it or it was just thrust and thrown to him. He did his best. I wish I could repeat that over and over. He did his best. Do you usually do your best? It's not difficult to know someone who does their best. They'll work with gratitude. They'll not choose work. They'll do work that is put before them. And they'll discuss the other issues later. They have a clean heart. They are humble. They give in the time. They give it their all. That was Joseph. Later on, when Pharaoh spotted him and gave him the most difficult job in the country, the one of being governor during a time of food crisis, he still did his best. There was no debate about his performance. When I used to work, my last job was at PwC. We would be rated as part of performance management. And we would be scored between 1 and 4. Where if you are given a 1, it would mean you are outstanding. Meaning you are maverick. Meaning you are distinctive. You have exceeded every other person's expectations, including the written expectations. That was a one. I know there are places where they start the other way, but whichever way. If you are given a 2, it means you are a high performer. Outstanding is up there. High performer is still up there. But there is something called outstanding. That is Maverick. So 2 would be high performer. With outstanding, you are people are awed by your abilities, by your capabilities, by your character, the way you do things. When you are 2 at high performer, people are still old, but you are human enough. People can relate. It is doable quite easily. High performer. Then there used to be number 3, which was performing as expected. And a lot of people would be there. Performing as expected. That is not Maverick. Then there used to be number 4, performing below expectation. So whenever you got a rating 4, you are put in what we call PIP, Performance Improvement Plan. I always used to get the 1, outstanding. And so I always got the promotions. I think the worst I got maybe was a 2, maybe once or twice. And today I see that with my employees. When I rate them, when we have performance meetings, there are those guys, no doubt, everyone knows they are outstanding because they do their best. How many of you would be rated as outstanding? In the job you do, in the place you're employed, or even at home when your mother sets you or your father allocates you a task. Because this starts right from home to the places where we work or employed, to the businesses that we do. Always aim to be the best. Mavericks engage in adventures of diligence and productivity. Any other thing is a lesser calling. The message here is quite simple. Always do your best wherever you are. In the path that God has called you to, always do your best. Paul reminded us to always give ourselves fully to the work because we know that our labor in the Lord is not in vain. Adventures of diligence and productive. Be productive with whatever you have. Be diligent. Let people say of you, this is a man who we can count on. This is a lady who we can count on. When a job is with him or her, we can go to sleep and know that it is done. I used to have a boss who I really learned a lot from. And whenever I worked with him, he would tell the others that when John is doing it, I can go to the balcony. Because I know when John is in the dancing floor, he would dance to the tune of the moment and does it all. And so I can go to the balcony and watch. I don't have to be in the floor. But for many of us, we don't know how to dance to the tune of the time. We dance as if we are waiting for another person to join us in the dance floor. And it's like your life is dependent on others. When it's your time to be in the dance floor, brethren, dance. Dance. Take up to the adventure and do it. Allow others a moment to go to the balcony and at least watch as you do it the Mavericks way. I like it when I see that Pastor Seth can go for a trip and he knows that things are okay here. Because whoever he has left is able to dance to the tune of the day. Let us grow children who can dance on the floor when it is their time to dance. Let us grow people around us, associates around us, who can take up to the moment and do it and give their best. But they will do that when they know that that is what we do ourselves. Adventures of diligence and productivity. But adventure number 6 is what I call adventures of purity. Adventures of purity. Now, Joseph was really tested to the limits on this one. And adventures were thrown to him that clearly tested his ability to say no. I read a book that says that the most difficult thing, yet the most important thing of today, is the ability to say no when you have to say no. If you cannot be able to say no when it is time to say no, then you are the weakest of all. Potiphar's wife tried really hard to seduce this man. Remember, we have been told that this man was very well built and handsome. In today's parlance, we would say he had a six-pack. Every young man today is looking for a six-pack. I own a gym and a spa, the best in the community. And every day it's full. And I thank God for the opportunity to be in that entrepreneur space. Every day it is full with clients. For the men, they are looking for that six-pack. And for the ladies, they are looking for? I didn't hear that. A flat tummy. A flat one, And they get it. And they work at it. And we cheer them on. I have the best trainers to make sure that you get that. And I encourage you here in church. If you're a man, get that six-pack. No excuse. It is possible. Don't be shapeless. Come for shape. We just charge a small fee for it. If you're a lady, yesterday I was talking to some ladies, 2 of them, and they are my clients in the properties business. And we started talking about the gym, and I was telling them, we offer those services. And one of them was talking about how to cut baby fat. And I told them, yes, that is possible. You don't have to live with it. And so next week they are starting their sessions in the gym. But from all those adventures, you get a well-built body. And we say, for you to succeed, you need to, in my book I argue that you need to pursue your SMAP formula. You need to be fit spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and then physically. I call it the SMAP formula. For you to be fit spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. The physical part, look no further. Come to next level of fitness. We take care of that. Percy here is taking care of the S part, spiritually. So, Joseph went through the adventures. He was seduced by Potiphar's wife. He had a well-built body. He was handsome, the Bible says. Those are not my words. But make no mistake about it, her efforts to get him to engage in immoral conduct were intense. Fairly intense. I hope the men here can relate, because it's not necessarily a bad thing to be approached by ladies. I think the issue is what you do with that. Joseph was approached. Joseph was approached. I listened to another interesting bishop the other day, and he was telling the congregation, turn to your neighbor. If you have a husband who have never been approached, then you need to pray God to give you one who can be approached. One of these flamboyant bishops was saying that. That was not me. It's not a bad thing to be up. It means people are noting that you are taking good care of yourself. The problem usually is what we do when we are approached. Joseph was approached. Some of you here has been approached. Either way, whether the ladies or the men. She directly asked him to sleep with her. She went ahead to touch his body. And she daily approached him. She was very persistent. But to Joseph's credit, he never gave in to her. He realized such action would be wicked in God's sight. If you look at 39 verses 9, Joseph was in faraway land. All conditions were working for him. Perhaps no one would ever have known. He was still a young man. Hot blood was flowing in his veins. And we all know that young men enjoy physical pressure too. But Joseph did not use any of these matters as an excuse to make a sinful decision. He started out pure and remained that way. That is what I call the adventures of purity. And that sounds like a good model for Christians of all ages. And I know in the course of your life, as you try out many things, you'll be tested. But may you stand firm like Joseph. May you be the maverick. Stand firm in the adventures of purity. But the seventh thing I talk about here is what I call the big picture. The adventures of big picture thinking. The big picture. In my book, I dedicate a whole chapter about the big picture. And I argue that until you know the big picture of your life, you will not succeed. Success is dependent on you defining the big picture of your life. My book in chapter 4, I say, focus on the big picture. And I highlight that as part of the human exploration of the moon, numerous space missions have been undertaken to study Earth's natural satellite. The biggest benefit that man has achieved by landing on the moon is that from that vantage position, man has been able to see the big picture of the earth. A picture he could never have seen by remaining on the earth's surface. Landing on the moon has informed our understanding of earth. Can you imagine how we would know earth today if no maverick dared to go to the moon? Our understanding of the earth we live in would be so skewed and so false. But because someone took the time to go to the moon and see the big picture from up there of the earth, we know that the earth is not flat. Otherwise, we would have been thinking it's all flat because we are sitting here and we are not eating like this. I encourage every one of us to know the big picture of their life. Your life may not necessarily be what you are going through now. It's much bigger than that. Your life are not the momentary afflictions that you go through. And even the Bible argues like that. It is much more than that. It's a greater destiny that God has called you to. And so like astronauts, mavericks take time to learn the big picture of their life. In my book, I give a very feed example, story that helps us to understand the big picture. And so in page 63, I argue, I consider this story about the three stone cutters. It provides a good image of what big picture thinking is. And I give that story. And the story goes like this, that one day, a traveler walking along a lane came across three stone cutters working in a quarry. Each was busy cutting a block of stones. Interested to find out what they were working on, the traveler asked the first stone cutter what he was doing. the stone cutter said, I am cutting a stone. Still no wiser, the traveler turned to the second stone cutter and asked him what he was doing. I am cutting this block of stone to make sure that it is square and its dimensions are uniform so that it will fit exactly in its place in the wall, said the second stone cutter. A bit closer to finding out and what the stone cutters were working on, but still unclear, the traveler turned to the third stone cutter. He seemed to be the happiest of the three, and when asked what he was doing, he replied, I am building a cathedral. Wow. 3 guys, all cutting stones. But when asked what they were doing, that is when you realize that one had the big picture thinking, but the others didn't. And that made all the difference. Look at the answers that these guys gave. The first one, who had no idea of the big picture of why he was there in the quarry. He was just doing his work. He didn't have understanding of the big picture. What did he say? I am cutting a stone. Very small picture of why he was in the quarry. The second one, a bit better. What did he say? I am cutting this block of stone to make sure that it is square and its dimensions are uniform so that it can fit in the wall. Almost there, but still not clicked the big picture. But the third one, awesome. I am building a cathedral. All the 3 stone cutters were correct in their answers. But the third had the big picture glasses on. He had an understanding of what his actions in the quarry were aiming at and that his contributions were part of something larger. In this case, it was a cathedral. No wonder he was the happiest of them all and motivated on the job. When you understand the big picture of your life, you are more motivated. You are more engaged. You are happier. Joseph did. Mavericks do. He ended up in Egypt as a slave and later as a second in command in the whole nation. Joseph looked beyond the fact that his brothers sold him into slavery. He saw God's hand in it. He chose to see God's hand in it. He could have seen injustice. He could have blamed them. He could have refused to move on and get stuck in that. But he saw the big picture. He saw God's hand in it. Here are his explanations to his brothers later when they came to look for food in Egypt. And he tells them, chapter 45, 5-8, he tells them, God sent me before you to preserve life. And God sent me before you to preserve a prosperity for you in the earth and save your lives. So now, it was not you who sent me here, but God. May we choose to see God in our tribulations. May we choose to see God when things are not working well. May we choose to see God in COVID situation. May we choose to see God when nothing seems to be tying up as quickly as we want. Because God is always in the big picture. Joseph's role was to help preserve the children of Israel, meaning that he was helping preserve the seed of the promised Messiah. He chose to see the big picture. Joseph was able to look past his own life and see the big picture. And you and I must do the same. If you fail to see the big picture of your life, you will suffer. You will blame others. You will always see like others are not helping you. You'll always try to look for God and you'll not be seeing him. Because you are trying to look for him in the small pictures of your life, the small adventures. But God will always be in the big adventure. And all other things are working towards the big picture. What is the big picture of your life? Please discover it. Because once you do, every other thing will hold together. You'll understand why you are in Syokimau at a time like this. You'll understand why you are in Light Spring at a time like this. And many other things. And you'll be happy and motivated. And you'll serve God at every season with gratitude. The adventures of the big picture. But the eighth adventure is the adventures of forgiveness. I know no one is able to bring this out better than Pastor Seth. I always like the way he creates that picture and brings up the message of forgiveness, because his own life is a testimony of that. But look at Joseph too. At 22 years later after Joseph's brother sold him into slavery, they came to Egypt to buy food. And he revealed to them just who he was. Of course, after a bit of drama. Testing them. But look. 22 years later, after your brothers threw you away, sold you into slavery, you meet them. For a lot of us, we would pour all our revenge on them. We'll be very mad. We'll punish them. We'll deny them any light. We would also put them into prison. We'll revenge. But look at Joseph. Instead of using his position of authority, what we can call his advantage, because each of us has an advantage here or there. Instead of using his advantage to take revenge on them, instead of threatening and yelling at them, he calmly said, "But now, do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sent me here. But now, do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourself because you sent me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life." He chooses to look at it differently. And because of that, because of seeing the big picture as we have said, because of appreciating that God was doing something greater in his life, he was able to forgive them. And that thrust him to another space that God had created or prepared him for. When their father died, Joseph's brother pleaded for forgiveness. And they came to him saying, "Now, please, forgive the trespasses of the servants of God, your father." But what was Joseph's response? He wept, then told them, "Do not be afraid, for I am in the praise of God." We like putting this and throwing this word, "I am in the praise of God." This is where it came from. Instead of taking revenge, instead of being mad, he chose to see it that way. Do not be afraid, for I am in the praise of God. But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. May we see life that way. When life becomes tough, when people have done on you things that you could never fathom, may we see that we are still in the praise of God. May we see that they have pushed us to the praise of God. And because of that, we will find peace, we will find healing when we are in the praise of God. If you read chapter 50, 17 to 19, you'll be able to see that. It's not always easy to forgive those who have done us wrong, but if we are truly grateful for the forgiveness that we have received from the Lord, then, as Ephesians 4:32 says, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave us, should come naturally for us. I know that's a difficult topic, but if you're here and you're still holding grudge, If you are here and you are still being weighed down by the weight of the burdens of what people did for you, may you learn to release so that you can be free, so that you can be able to serve God, not as a slave, but as a co-heir together with Him of the kingdom. When you are free, when you are light, it will be easier. But the final adventure I want us to look at is what I call the adventures of faith. Joseph had his own adventures of faith. And through his journey, the journey of his life, the journey of the path that God had given him, he chose to cast his faith up there to his maker, to the bigger things of his life. And that kept propelling him to greater heights because he had faith. Faith is how is faith defined in Romans? Is it Hebrews? Yes, in Hebrews. Eh? I think it's the hope of the things you have not seen, isn't it? Exactly. So it must be things you've not even touched and seen, isn't it? They're out there, but you hope. You believe that you'll get them. Just like we know we'll meet our Maker. Before his death, Joseph told his brothers, look at this faith. I am dying, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land of which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. That is Genesis 50, 24, 25. How do we know that Joseph spoke those words by faith? The Bible says in Hebrews, yes, it's Hebrews 11:22. In Hebrews there is that chapter 11, that talks about the heroes of faith, isn't it? We call them what? The heroes of faith. Yeah? You know, among those heroes of faith, one of the ones that are quoted is this Joseph in the New Testament. And so we know that it was by faith. Because in Hebrews 11:22 it says, by faith, Joseph, this Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instructions concerning his bones. In other words, he had faith that his people, the Israelites, will still reach to the promised land. And he desired that his bones will be taken there when that moment comes. That is faith. So that even if he didn't finish the journey as he would have intended, he had faith that the journey would continue. Look at his thought process. God promised that he would bring us, the Israelites, to the land of Canaan. So since God always keeps his covenants, I want you to take my bones to Canaan and bury them there. That is great faith. God has also given us great and precious promises. We need to accept them by faith and trust totally in him, always looking to the spiritual land of promise that is called heaven. What are your adventures of faith? What covenants do you have with God? When you pray, when you go to your closet, what has God promised you? Do you vividly pursue it by faith? Joseph. The adventures of love and hate. The adventures through unpleasant circumstances, through God's presence and blessings. Adventures of style and character, diligence and productivity, adventures of purity, the big picture of your life, adventures of forgiveness, adventures of faith,
And in our own lives, I pray and wish that we'll desire to walk with God in all these things, despite the circumstances, despite what we may have to go through, that we'll go through it with the full knowledge that God is with us, with the full knowledge that it is well with us, with the full knowledge that God is in control. And whatever opportunities that God gives us, whatever circumstances that the world throws to us, may we make the best out of them. Because when we do that, we glorify God and we become the little trailblazers, the little mavericks that God had intended for us. And so, think about that. What are your adventures? Are you shining through your adventures the way God would have wanted? Are you making a difference? Are you leaving a trail of things that can be said of you, things that can be documented, things that can be said that there were real adventures of faith? Yes. Okay. You don't need to go back. Okay. Sorry, I think the power ran out on us, but God is in control. Maybe the message was becoming too good. Okay? So, as we go through the adventures of our lives, let us make sure that we are leaving a mark. It is not for no reason that God will allow us to go through the adventures. So whatever adventures you go through, make sure you are leaving a trail of victory, a trail of all things that can help us to glorify God. And I know as we do that, God will bless us, and the little mavericks in us will be able to come out. So I want to call Pastor Seth to just come and pray for us as he crosses the session. Thank you very much. As we go into the week, let's think about these things, and God will bless us. Thank you very much. God bless you.